We'd been together for 3 years. And for 3 years, both James and I were faking it. He pretended to love me, and I pretended I was truly loved. That all changed when we were trapped in a car crash. He finally dropped the act. Larry, I'm sick of your whining and your spoiled brat attitude. How could I ever love you? I looked down at the steel rod sticking out of my stomach. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. Because I think I'm about to die. With a deafening bang, my world flipped upside down. I don't know how much time passed. Slowly, I opened my eyes. The one remaining headlight cast a weak glow on James, slumped in the passenger seat. James, wake up. Don't you die on me. My heart was pounding. A ringing in my ears drowned out everything else. I couldn't hear my own voice. All I felt was a crushing pain in my chest. James couldn't die. Not now. I hadn't had the chance to tell him. The truth is cough, cough. James coughed, his brow furrowed. He opened his eyes. He tried to move, then realized his shoulder and right leg were pinned by the crumpled frame of the car. Then a sudden low laugh. Hey, you're a little too eager, aren't you? Begging me to fly home early to be with you, just so you could stage a car crash to kill me? My whole body was numb. My brain felt like it had shut down. What are you talking about? I asked blankly. James leaned back against the twisted seat. A crack appeared in his usually calm expression. Stop playing dumb, Larry, he said coldly. Your dad hired someone to run my parents off the road and kill them. Today, you're just pulling the same old trick. I just didn't think he'd be willing to gamble with your life, too. No, that's not it. I kept slamming my hand on the car horn, hoping to attract the attention of any passing cars. You shouldn't jump to conclusions without any proof, I said with a frown. Proof? James turned his head, his blood-streaked face dripping with sarcasm. The only reason I got together with you was to get dirt on your family's crimes. What did you think it was for? My lips trembled. In the end, I said nothing. Yeah. I knew James had another motive when he asked me out when we started dating. I'd known for 3 years, but I couldn't turn down the chance. Because before that, I had been secretly in love with him for years and years. My crush came true only to be a lie. I stubbornly believed that James actually liked me. Even just a little. Don't say any more, I said, clumsily changing the subject. My voice was hoarse. We should call 911 first. It was dark, and the car was a wreck. I looked around but couldn't find my phone. Call 911? James's voice was calm and certain. You mean call someone to finish me off for good? No, I said quietly. James looked over at me, his gaze questioning and suspicious. Probably because I was usually so sensitive. One wrong word from James could set me off. So now he was surprised by how calm I was. He frowned slightly. Are you hurt? I don't know. My eyes hadn't adjusted to the dark yet. I couldn't see clearly. I had no strength. Only the pain was slowly coming back. Everything hurt. It was probably just a normal reaction after such a violent crash. Probably not, James said coolly. After all, you're not exactly tough. You can't handle the slightest bit of pain or injustice. I knew James didn't love me, but hearing him now, it wasn't just a lack of love. There was so much resentment. Before, the slightest discomfort would have me calling James, demanding he detour to the grocery store on his way home to make me soup. Even after I got better, I'd cling to him, needing him to drive me everywhere, wait for me, pick me up. I'd often get a sudden whim, demanding he drop his work to take me on a short trip abroad. So, in James's eyes, Larry was an arrogant, unreasonable, spoiled rich kid who acted on every impulse. But I wasn't like that with anyone else. I was just testing his limits, trying to prove to myself over and over, see, no one would put up with this for no reason. So James must love me. Bzzzzz. It was a phone vibrating. A faint light appeared outside the shattered windshield. It was James's phone. It had been thrown about 15 feet away, illuminating a patch of gravelly ground. No wonder no cars had passed since the crash. We had been knocked off the embankment. The car, with us in it, had plummeted into a deep ditch more than 30 feet down. It was the middle of the night on a remote road. Honking was useless, and my phone was nowhere to be found. This meant if we didn't find a way to get help, we could be here all night without anyone noticing. By then, James's injuries could get worse, even life-threatening. Wait, the car's Bluetooth could answer calls. I struggled to lift my hand, trying to start the car. My legs were pinned, but I could just reach the brake pedal. As I stomped on the brake, I felt a strange pulling sensation in my abdomen. I ignored it. I pressed the start button several times, but the car was dead. At the same time, the phone on the ground stopped vibrating. Everything fell silent. Even the one remaining headlight slowly faded to black. Then we faintly heard the drip, drip, drip of liquid hitting the ground. That's gasoline. James let out a cold laugh. Larry, if your dad doesn't come save you soon, you're gonna get blown up with me. He won't. I fumbled in the darkness, my hand touching James's warm body. What are you doing? He asked warily. Strangling you, I said irritably. I traced a path along his neck and shoulder until I found the twisted seat back pinning him down. I gave it a hard yank. Crack. The bent part snapped back, freeing one of James's arms. At the same time, an indescribable pain exploded from my stomach. I bit my lip and leaned my head back against the seat, swallowing the scream that rose in my throat. James quickly freed his other hand and started desperately trying to break open the passenger door. It was too badly damaged. Even as he rocked the entire car frame, the door wouldn't budge. I was drenched in a cold sweat from the pain. I couldn't help but shiver. Suddenly, I said, James, you do like me a little, don't you? Larry, I like you. 3 years ago, James had suddenly found me and said, will you be my boyfriend? He was tall with dark, intense eyes. When his gaze met mine, I felt like I was falling into something bottomless. My head was spinning, but I still managed to answer on instinct. Okay. After the word left my mouth, my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. I replayed that moment again and again, trying to memorize every detail. The summer night, the late blooming stars, James's light blue shirt, and the defined muscles of his forearms revealed by his rolled-up sleeves. In the first month of our relationship, I did everything I had fantasized about doing with him during my 7-year crush. Then I overheard him on the phone. Yes, we're together. James's voice was low. Don't worry, I don't like Larry. As soon as I find the evidence of his father's crimes, I'll break up with him. His father, my dad. Being with me was just a shortcut for James to investigate him. My hand was already on the doorknob, but I froze. Should I end it? I asked myself. The answer was no. I couldn't accept it. Besides, I believed my dad would never let him find any so-called evidence. I was sure of it. My dad was a good man. So I told myself, give him one more chance. Just one. Maybe James would get fed up with my bad temper first. I started acting out in every way I could think of, doing things that, to an outsider, would look like I was bullying James. I'd purposely make him late picking me up. I'd buy him tacky, brightly colored ties and order him to wear them to company meetings. I'd make him personally deliver snacks to my office, only to say I suddenly didn't want them and send him to buy something else from another store. Through it all, James silently took everything I dished out, pretending to be infinitely patient with me. My assistant would say, Mr. Miller, your boyfriend is so gentle. He loves you so much. Gentle? She had no idea how rough the seemingly gentle James could be at night. But she must have been right about one thing. James loved me. I turned my head to look at him and whispered again, you do like me, don't you? James seemed to give up on the car door. He turned to face me. He enunciated every word. Larry, listen to me. In these 3 years, there has not been a single moment where I liked you. You're lying. I felt a chill and looked down, avoiding his eyes. If you don't like me, why do you like sleeping with me? If you don't like me, why would you break down my door when I was throwing a fit? Why would you shut me up with a kiss when I was endlessly cursing at you? James was always rational, always composed. Everyone thought he was trustworthy and reliable. But I was like a timid provocateur, constantly trying to rip off James's perfect mask, while terrified he would actually lose his patience and look at me with disgust. That's why I was quick to anger, but also easy to appease. When he carried me to bed, I would wrap my arms tightly around his neck. James would say in a deep voice, "Don't be scared. I won't drop you." My anger would vanish, and I'd just pout and say I wasn't scared. James would last a long time, so long that I'd eventually run out of energy to keep up. My hand would slip from his sweaty back, and he would grab it again and kiss it. He'd slow down, calling me baby in a hoarse voice. It was getting colder. I was forced out of my memories. Then I heard James say, "Because you're easy, Larry. What man wouldn't like a convenient lay who throws himself at you?" A sharp, stabbing pain, like being shot, hit my heart. I froze, and it took a few seconds before I could take a full breath again. "So, that's how it is," I said calmly. The sword that had been hanging over my head for 3 years had finally fallen. I wasn't shocked. Instead, I felt a strange and brutal clarity. James slammed his body against the door again, hard. "Actually," he said, his voice strained. He didn't finish. Beep. A long horn blast suddenly sounded from above us. Did a passing car spot us? A large swath of light poured down on us. The rumbling of a vehicle grew closer, then faded. James turned and yelled something out the window, but it was lost in another horn blast as the vehicle moved away. He sat back up. It was a big rig just passing through. The driver probably didn't see us. I sat motionless in the darkness, my breathing shallow. After a few seconds, I asked James, "Did you find the evidence on my dad?" He was silent for a moment, then said, "Not yet. You won't. My dad's not that kind of person." I continued, "My mom passed away when I was 6. My dad ran the company and took care of me all by himself. He never remarried. He spoils me. Anything I want, he gives me, no questions asked. But he has one bottom line. I can't break the law, and I can't hurt anyone. He actually likes you a lot. He even got you a gift for your birthday tomorrow." I gave a small, low laugh. "But that's probably just because I like you so much, and he loves me." James seemed to want to argue. "Larry, actually, You could try looking for an answer from a different direction," I said, interrupting him. I didn't want to hear his excuses, not even a fake attempt at comfort. "A different direction?" "Yeah," I prompted. "Who told you my dad was responsible for your parents' death?" James fell silent. So I went on, "It was James's uncle, your uncle, right?" The suggestion must have hit home immediately. "Impossible," he snapped. Even in the dark, I could feel his gaze on me. A cold, emotionless scrutiny. "You've been investigating me behind my back?" "Yes," I admitted. "And I found some things you might not want to believe." This was the real reason I had demanded James cut his business trip short and fly back immediately. His uncle wasn't as clean as everyone thought. It was very likely he was connected to James's parents' car crash. And tonight's crash was probably his doing, too. "Ha!" James laughed with contempt. "So now that the car crash failed to silence me, you're starting to frame my uncle?" He didn't believe me. I expected that. But I was running out of time. In that brief moment when the truck's headlights had illuminated us, I had seen it. My chest and stomach were soaked in blood. A steel rod had gone straight through me from behind, pinning me to the driver's seat. "I'm dying." I couldn't let James hurt my dad. James opened the glove compartment. He hesitated for a second, then opened it. It was too dark. "Feel around," I said. "There's a manila folder on top. When you get rescued, make sure you look at it yourself. You'll have your answer then, about who's framing whom." The consciousness I was holding onto by sheer willpower started to fade. I felt so tired, so sleepy. Suddenly, James asked, "What's this box?" I slowly blinked my eyes. "Your birthday present," I said in a low voice. James's tone softened. "You said you weren't getting me anything," he said, his voice a little deep. "Before James left, we had a huge fight. Truthfully, it was me throwing a one-sided tantrum because his sudden business trip ruined the birthday celebration I had planned for him. I stood between him and his suitcase, arms crossed. "Go on, leave," I said aggressively. "You can forget about any birthday wishes from me, and you can definitely forget about a present. From now on, I'm deciding to forget your birthday even exists." James looked back at me, then walked over. He picked me up, still standing ramrod straight, and set me to the side. "Larry, don't be so childish," he said. You only act childish in front of the person you like. I didn't say it out loud, because James was hugging me. My face was buried in the crook of his shoulder. I felt the vibration in his chest. I heard James say, "Having you is enough. I don't need a birthday present." Thinking back on it now, he really was a good actor. So good that I actually thought I was loved. But I still said, "Buying you a present actually makes me happy." A few more cars sped by above us. I was startled awake and heard James smashing the car window. His breathing was unsteady. "Larry, take off your jacket. My clothes aren't thick enough." I smelled blood, but I couldn't tell whose it was. Maybe the broken glass had cut James's arm. But I couldn't take off my jacket. So I stayed perfectly still and said, "I'm cold, and this is a custom designer piece. If it gets ruined, are you going to pay for it?" "Larry." James seethed through his teeth. "You're hopeless. You might as well just stay in this car forever and never get out." I smirked, like a nasty little kid, pleased with myself for successfully provoking the person I liked. But James wasn't a little kid. He wasn't going to be attracted to me because of my pathetic mind games. He wasn't going to care about me. He hated me. Just before I slipped back into unconsciousness, I heard James call my name. "Larry?" I had no strength left. My eyes half closed. I whispered, "Go. Find help. Don't worry about me for now. Probably won't make it, Larry." James's voice seemed to sink to the bottom of the sea, fading away. Then it shot back up out of the water, crashing into my ears. "Larry." I opened my eyes, looking around in a daze. I saw James striding towards me. He wasn't wearing a tie, and even the buttons on his suit jacket were undone. I glanced around and realized I was at the airport. There were a lot of people, but they were all frozen in place. It's a dream. I was dreaming of the day before my 2-year anniversary with James. "What were you doing in South Africa? Are you crazy? You could have gotten killed." James's brow was furrowed, his voice loud, all his usual composure gone. He grabbed my arm, his grip tight. Then he saw the red stain on my white shirt. He swept me up into his arms. "You're hurt? We're going to the hospital right now." I laughed carelessly. "It's not blood, just spilled red wine." How pathetic. I was giddy with joy because I felt like James cared. But then it hit me. Maybe he was just afraid I'd die and he wouldn't be able to use me anymore. So I suddenly got angry again and struggled out of his arms. "Why are you yelling at me?" I snapped. "You were the one who said the diamonds in South Africa were the best, that you wouldn't just buy any old matching rings." I threw the royal blue velvet box in my hand at his chest. "I bought them, so if you don't want them, just throw them away," I said, not caring what came out of my mouth. The box fell to the floor. James picked it up and opened it. Inside was a pair of diamond rings. The diamonds weren't large, set into a delicate groove in a simple band, sparkling but understated. He looked at them for a while. "There's been fighting between local militias over there recently," he said, his voice laced with frustration. "Don't you know how dangerous that is?" I didn't say anything, my eyes downcast as he pulled me into a hug. James's heart was beating a little faster than mine. The stubble on his chin scratched against my cheek. It was itchy, but I didn't pull away. I didn't apologize either. I just mumbled, "Put on the ring, and you're never allowed to take it off." Then I closed my eyes. It was so warm. It felt like I was being truly and deeply loved by James. I thought to myself, if only things could stay like this forever. If they did, I promise I would be good. I would never throw a tantrum again. But soon, I was woken up by a series of urgent shouts. "Larry." It was James again. "Wake up." I struggled to open my eyes and felt him shaking my arm. I wanted to tell him to stop, that it hurt. Before I could speak, I heard James's frantic voice. "I broke the window. Now I need your help to pull my right leg out. Then I can climb out and get help." He grabbed my hands and placed them on his right knee. "Help me." With that, James used both his hands to pull his knee outward. I gritted my teeth and used the last of my strength, pulling on his pant leg at the same time. "Ugh!" James let out a long, frustrated groan and then slumped back against the seat. It didn't work. I fell to the side, completely drained. James patted me. Larry, don't give up, he said, panting. Let's try one more time. I closed my eyes and whispered, no, I really don't have any energy left. And it hurts so much. Larry, can you stop acting like a child for once? You're still throwing a rich kid tantrum at a time like this. No matter how unreasonable I'd been in the past, James had never used such an angry tone with me. I lifted my eyes a little. I teased him on purpose. If you want my help, you have to say you love me, that you like me a lot, then I'll do it. I had tried to force him to say it like this before. James never avoided it, but he never gave in either. Sometimes, he would look at me with a gentle, mature expression and say, stop messing around. Other times, he would fiercely shut my mouth with a kiss. Maybe he was really fed up with me. Today, James let out a cold laugh. He said, Larry, I'm sick of your whining and your spoiled brat attitude. How could I ever love you? It's strange. Why is it that even though I knew he didn't love me, hearing him say it still felt like my heart was being squeezed to the point of excruciating pain? I let out a soft breath. I wanted to say, I know, but my throat felt like it was clogged with sand, and I couldn't get any words out. The joke was so out of place. I should be ashamed of myself. Actually, there were a lot of things I should be ashamed of, like being so bossy and spoiled when we were together, having such a sharp tongue, such a foul temper. I looked down at the steel rod sticking out of my abdomen. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm sorry for making you so unhappy for so long. It won't happen again. Maybe because I had never admitted I was wrong before, my sudden apology stunned James for a moment. In the darkness, he said in a low voice, actually, if in the future you could just beep beep. A horn sounded above us again. This time we heard someone yelling, hey down there. Don't worry. The rescue team is here. A flood of light poured down. James turned his head and looked at me. In a daze, I heard a rush of panicked, erratic breathing. The light source was moving. The spots in front of my eyes flickered, getting brighter and brighter. The sounds of footsteps and voices closed in. In the chaos, someone yelled, medics, get over here. One of them is seriously injured. The driver's side door was quickly pried open. A rescuer prepared to cut the steel rod from my body. This is going to cause extreme pain. Someone get in here and hold him steady. I peeled my eyes open and saw James's pale, terrified face. He stood there frozen in front of me, behind the rescuer, his lips moving but no sound coming out. I blinked, slowly took the ring off the ring finger of my left hand, and held it out with a trembling hand. I looked at James. In a very low, very weak voice, I said to him, from now on, you're free. My fingertips suddenly went limp. The ring fell to the ground with a soft tink. Couldn't hold on anymore. I closed my eyes. Larry, James finally cried out, but there was no one left to answer him. All the pain vanished in an instant. I woke up to find myself standing in front of the car, watching my own rescue from the outside. James was on one knee on the car's running board, leaning in to hold me in his arms. He cradled my chin in the crook of his shoulder like he always did, but his arms were held loosely around me, as if he was afraid to apply any pressure. The sound of a power saw filled the air. Sparks flew behind me. It's okay. Larry, don't be scared. It's okay. James whispered into my ear, murmuring over and over again like a mantra. Too bad the face resting on his shoulder was deathly pale, the eyelashes still and unmoving, completely expressionless. You don't have to comfort him now, I said silently to myself. Larry won't make a scene anymore. He's being very good. So are you satisfied? James seemed to realize this too. He stopped talking and began to tremble uncontrollably. We were put into the same ambulance. Because I had a brief moment of respiratory arrest on the way, all the paramedics crowded around me. James's head injury hadn't been treated yet. He sat to the side, his face covered in blood, his eyes red and unblinking, fixed on my heart monitor. The wound isn't clean. There's too much bleeding. Did he move around in the car? Did he aggravate the wound? James's breath hitched. Yes, he said, his voice strained. He tried to start the car. He used a lot of strength to pry the bent seat off me. And in the end, he was even asked to contort his body to help free James's right leg. And when he failed, when he was on the verge of death, he was told he was being whiny and throwing a spoiled brat tantrum. The monitor kept beeping with sharp alarms. James looked like he'd been thrown into the ocean without warning, forgetting how to breathe. His back was ramrod straight, his whole body like a bow drawn so tight it could snap at any moment. Speeding all the way, we quickly arrived at the hospital. James was blocked outside the trauma room, staring blankly at the closed white doors. A nurse walked over and said to him, "Sir, you're injured too. You need to have that looked at and bandaged. Please come with me." When he didn't respond, the nurse moved to stand in front of him, only then seeing his vacant eyes, as if he were completely unaware of his own injuries. "Sir?" the nurse repeated. James's reply was nonsensical. He muttered to himself, that wasn't the sound of gasoline dripping, it was his blood. The nurse asked, "I'm sorry, what did you say?" Why didn't he say anything? James couldn't stand any longer. He slid down the wall to the floor, his voice full of anguish. He was so badly hurt. Why didn't he tell me? The nurse crouched down to comfort him. When trapped, seeing a companion severely injured can cause extreme stress and anxiety, making it impossible to calmly call for help. He must care about you a lot, right? That's why he didn't want you to worry. Care? I stood to the side asking myself. I suppose I did, but not anymore. A nurse who had been part of the rescue team came out of the elevator and handed James a manila folder. "This is yours, isn't it?" It was left at the rescue site. "It looks important." James had forgotten something so important? He wasn't the type to be so careless. Especially not when that folder contained the clues and evidence he cared about most. I looked at him, confused. I watched as he mechanically took it and placed it on the floor beside him. He clasped his hands together, then opened them. In his palm lay a blood-stained ring. He forgot the file but remembered the ring I threw away. This was so unlike James. He wouldn't care about something so meaningless. About 10 minutes later, the elevator dinged. The doors opened, and my dad walked out, his eyes red. He saw James and hauled him up from the floor. "What happened?" he demanded. "Larry was just picking you up from the airport. How could he be so badly injured?" James's eyes moved, and tears welled up. He said hoarsely, "On the way home, a truck hit us and we crashed into a ditch off the side of the road." My dad staggered. "The driver? Did you call the police?" James nodded. Then he handed the folder to my dad. "What's in here is likely connected to the crash. Please give it to the police." My dad opened it, and after reading just one page, his face filled with shock. "James, are you sure? This has your uncle's." "I'm sure," James said, his expression blank. "It doesn't matter anymore. None of it matters now." My dad let go of him and raised his arm, as if he were about to strike James across the face. "Pull yourself together." His hand landed on James's shoulder instead. "My dad's side. Larry's going to be okay." But even as he said it, his eyes instantly filled with tears. He sat down on the bench, his head bowed, and I could see the white hairs that seemed to have sprouted overnight. I sat down next to my dad and heard him say to James, "That foolish boy of mine has liked you for a long time. You knew that, right?" James leaned against the wall and slowly turned his head. My dad looked up at him, the fine wrinkles around his eyes visible. "You've probably forgotten, but you two met when you were very young." "We weren't that young, actually. 12 or 13 is old enough to remember someone special. Back then, my dad was always busy with work, so I spent my holidays at his company. He would often set me up in a conference room to do my homework. But I would just play CEO, watch cartoons on the projector, or sing into the microphone. I never did any actual homework. Then one day, my dad brought in a boy and told me to call him Big Brother. "This is your uncle and aunt's son. He'll be studying here with you often from now on. If you have any questions you can't solve, you can ask your big brother." I snorted and pretended to read my book. The door closed, and the boy sat down at the opposite corner of the long table. I peeked up at him. Annoyed, I slammed my book shut and went back to messing with the laptop on the lectern, making a lot of noise. The boy got up and left the room, probably to tattle on me. I ran over to his seat, planning to maliciously hide his books. Just as I picked them up, he walked back in. In my panic, I knocked over his water bottle, spilling water all over his books. He didn't get mad. He just quickly wiped up the water and said, "It's okay." My mom put plastic covers on them. I looked at the neatly covered books in his hands, their corners sharp and protected. Suddenly, I felt a wave of self-pity. He bent down, tilting his head to look me in the eyes. Then he said, "I'm sorry. I forgot you don't have a mom." He picked up one of his books, took off the cover that already had his name on it, and turned it inside out. He carefully wrapped it around my frayed, dog-eared book. "What's your name?" he asked. I looked down and mumbled, "Larry." The boy wrote my name on the book cover, stroke by stroke. From then on, James's name was hidden on the inside cover of my book, on the back of my own name. "That silly kid, he still has the book cover you gave him," my dad said softly, looking at James's pale face. "Not long after that, your parents, at your uncle's suggestion, pulled their investment out of my company. So, you two didn't see each other again until Larry got into the same university as you." James asked. He got into Bradford because of me?" My dad glanced at the operating room door and gave a bitter smile. "Yeah. Once that kid found out where you were, he started studying like crazy. I almost didn't recognize him. When he was 18, he got in. He ran home and told me he only made it because he liked someone a lot. I asked him who it was, told him to bring them home so I could meet them. But the little rascal just stammered and mumbled that the person he liked was a man. He thought I would get angry, that I would hit him. He just covered his head and sat on the floor." My dad glanced at the door again. "But how could I ever hit him? Whether he loves a man or a woman doesn't matter. The whole reason I make money is to see him happy. When I can't work anymore, if he wants to take over the company, he can. If he doesn't, I'll sell my shares and we'll travel the world together." Just as he finished speaking, the operating room door suddenly opened. A doctor walked out quickly. "The patient has multiple intestinal injuries and is in critical condition. Who's going to sign the critical condition notice?" James pushed himself up, his hand shaking as he reached for the form. "I'll sign it." "James," my dad pressed his hand down. "Let me do it." The operating room door closed again. James stood frozen in the middle of the hallway like a lost and abandoned animal. My dad buried his face in his hands, his voice choked with sobs. "Should I have just sold the shares a long time ago? My child hasn't even had a proper trip with his dad. Hasn't even been properly loved." Hearing this, James shuddered violently and suddenly dropped to his knees. "I'm sorry, it's all my fault. I'm sorry." I didn't look at him anymore. Instead, I scooted closer to my dad and rested my head on his shoulder. "Don't be sad, old man," I said through tears. "I'm not going to die." The moment I said it, a force pulled me into a dark vortex. Felt like stepping on air, falling into an abyss. I snapped my eyes open and found myself back on that night 3 years ago when I met James. On a giant cruise ship, the investment dinner was winding down. The deck outside the main dining room was becoming empty. My dad had already gone back to his room to rest, but I couldn't bear to leave because James was still there. When the spotlights on the deck went out, that person called out to me. Now I stood in the darkness, witnessing a fake confession. The me in the scene had a dazed, infatuated look, about to say yes. "Don't!" I screamed at myself. "Don't believe him. Larry, you're such an idiot. It was all wrong from the very beginning. I shouldn't have just gotten together with him for no reason. I shouldn't have known James didn't love me and still gone along with this charade. I was too arrogant. I deluded myself into thinking he would eventually develop real feelings for me." My heart felt like it was being stabbed with a red-hot poker. The pain was so intense I squeezed my eyes shut. When I opened them again, I was staring at a white ceiling. I really didn't die. I was just lying weakly in a hospital bed. One of my hands was being held tightly. I turned my head. On James's ashen face, a small smile appeared, as if he were the one who had just survived a near-death experience. James lowered his head, pressing it against the back of my hand. "Larry," he said, "you're finally awake. Half of my face was covered by an oxygen mask. I blinked listlessly. With all my strength, I pulled my hand out of his grasp. Larry, are you still not willing to see James? I was propped up in bed, eating apple slices a nurse had cut for me. I shook my head. The car crash your parents were in, and the one you were in, it's all been cleared up. It was his uncle. His uncle's been caught and sentenced. He probably won't be getting out for the rest of his life. It's all over. He said he wants to apologize to you in person. The day I woke up, James's presence caused me to have a brief cardiac arrhythmia. The doctors suggested he stay away for a while. It had been half a month. He only ever stood guard outside my hospital room door. According to my dad, James would only come into the suite's living area when I was asleep, watching me through the glass of the treatment room. Do you hate him? My dad asked. I shook my head. It wasn't hate. I just didn't understand. Why was James so insistent on getting forgiveness from someone he hated? It was pointless. And James didn't do pointless things. My dad took the small bowl from my hands. You've just started eating solid food again. Don't eat too much. He sat down on the edge of my bed and stroked my hair. He smiled. My Larry is all grown up now, able to handle his own relationships. But Dad thinks it's better for adults to talk things out clearly. You two, right now, you're acting like a pouting couple giving each other the silent treatment. We weren't a couple anymore. We never even really were. I felt a slight twinge in my stomach and curled up under the covers. I thought, Dad's right. James, we need to have a proper ending. So when I was transferred to the recovery center, I didn't avoid James. He saw me walk out of the hospital room, a look of surprised and awkward joy on his face. He walked up to me and said gently, Larry, can I take you to the recovery center? I bought you some things, they're in the trunk of the car. They're all, thanks but no thanks. I looked him straight in the eye and said, let's get everything out in the open right now, and then let's not see each other again. Hearing this, a look of pain spread across James's face. He raised his hand, as if to touch me, but stopped a few inches away and let it drop. His voice was hoarse. I know everything now. About us meeting as kids, and you getting into Bradford because of me. That's all in the past. I cut him off again, my voice calm. What we need to talk about now is the future. I'll have someone move my things out of your place today. As for transferring my shares in your overseas company, my lawyer will be in touch with you soon. I'm sorry, James interrupted, as if he didn't want to hear any of it. I shouldn't have listened to my uncle. I shouldn't have mistaken your father for the killer. I shouldn't have said those things to you and hurt you. I shouldn't have not realized you were hurt and still made you help me. I'm sorry. Larry, I'm sorry. And I gave a placid smile. The worst thing you did was get with me just to use me. But I accept your apologies. Though I couldn't bring myself to say it's okay, I tried to sound as carefree as possible. Let's just end things here. It's over. James looked like he'd been punched in the gut, staring at me blankly. I looked away and started walking towards the elevator. As I passed him, he grabbed my wrist. Larry. James's brow furrowed as he said my name. His Adam's apple bobbed a few times before he finally got the words out. Let's not break up, okay? I pulled my arm free and said with my back to him, as soon as I find the evidence of his father's crimes, I'll break up with him. You haven't forgotten who said that, have you? In that instant, James looked as if he had been struck by lightning. On my third day at the recovery center, I saw James again. He was still wearing the same dark gray suit he'd had on the day I was discharged. He hadn't shaved, his chin was covered in dark stubble. At first, he appeared silently like a ghost at my door, following me to the back garden and the tea room. After receiving my wary, annoyed glares, and after I complained about him, he actually had the nerve to put on one of the center's light blue staff uniforms. He stood right in front of me, bold as brass. He was even wearing a ridiculous, transparently fake-looking mask. I wanted to lose my temper, but I didn't have the strength back yet. All I could do was say helplessly, you don't have to do this. Don't do these pointless things just because you feel guilty. Guilt is pointless. It doesn't make the person who was hurt feel any better. But James said, it's not guilt. He stood across from me, backlit, his expression hidden in the shadows. The scene was too much like it was 3 years ago. I couldn't help but tense up. Then James said solemnly, "It's not guilt. I don't want to break up. Larry, I can't live without you. I love you." I thought I would be completely over it. But in that moment, a deafening ringing filled my ears, piercing my temples. A wave of nausea washed over me. I ran into the bathroom and started vomiting uncontrollably. I think James rushed in after me, then quickly left. I don't remember clearly. I just know I ended up on the bed, drenched in a cold sweat, and was only able to calm down after a doctor gave me an injection. I lay curled up on my side under the covers. I could hear my dad's suppressed, angry voice and James's choked apologies over and over. The doctor said the vomiting was only partly due to my fragile stomach. The main reason was psychological. My dad took me to see a therapist, and he moved our round-the-world trip up on the calendar. In the fall, I saw the sea at Aizu and the red maple leaves at Shizenji Temple for the first time. While feeding the deer in Nara, a man standing far away from us was rammed by a buck. I wanted to go see if he needed help, but my dad immediately stopped me. The buck probably thought he looked shady. It's no surprise he got rammed. I just laughed it off. Next, we went to Manila and Bohol in the Philippines. Then we went to the UK and watched the sunset from Calton Hill in Edinburgh. We arrived in Switzerland at the end of December, the golden age for skiing. My dad said his old bones couldn't take a fall, so he stayed at the hotel to soak in the hot springs. He reminded me to be careful on the slopes. After practicing on the beginner's slope all morning, I felt a surge of confidence. Without realizing it, I had drifted into the expert area. Just as a snowboarder was about to crash into me on a steep descent, a tall man in black pulled me into his arms to shield me. As we fell, I heard a sharp crack. Bad news. It sounded like a bone broke. Good news. It wasn't one of mine. Thank you. Are you okay? I scrambled up and, along with the snowboarder, helped him up. The man in black seemed to be in a lot of pain, letting out a muffled groan as he curled his leg. My fault, I said anxiously. Let me call you an ambulance. The man in black waved his hand to refuse but didn't speak. Was he mute? I felt even more embarrassed and crouched down, saying gently, "Don't worry. I'll take full responsibility for your medical bills and living expenses." The man paused, staring at me blankly through his black ski goggles. The ski patrol arrived with a stretcher, asking about the situation in broken English. Just as they were about to lift him onto the stretcher, the man in black suddenly started talking to them in fluent German. The pronunciation of German is completely different from Chinese, but the more I listened, the stranger it sounded. There was an inexplicable familiarity to it. I tentatively said to him, "James?" The man in black froze. He lowered his head slightly. It was a clear sign of guilt. I yanked his ski goggles off. Unsurprisingly, I was met with a pair of familiar eyes. I was furious. It was so bizarre. "James, what are you doing here?" James looked up, appearing hesitant and afraid to speak. I stood up, looking down at him. "Fine. I'll leave Switzerland immediately." The moment I lifted my foot, 2 hands grabbed my calf tightly. "Don't go." James's voice was low and hoarse, his posture pathetic. The paramedics and tourists nearby all shot me disapproving looks, as if I was repaying kindness with cruelty. To uphold the reputation of my countrymen, I gritted my teeth, helped James up, and took him back to the hotel. As soon as we entered the lobby, I dumped him onto a sofa in the waiting area and turned to go upstairs. James scrambled to his feet, trying to follow me with a limp, but ended up falling to the floor just as the elevator doors opened. I called for a bellhop twice, but no one came. I squeezed my eyes shut, then looped my arm through James's and dragged him into the elevator. "What floor?" I snapped, staring at the elevator doors. James let out a suppressed cough and said, 2103. 21st floor is the 21st floor. Who asked for your room number? I couldn't help but glare at James, only then noticing his flushed face. The arm I was holding felt abnormally hot. I frowned. "Are you running a fever?" James, still wearing his mask, nodded. I exploded. Are you trying to die? Coming skiing with a high fever? If you want to die, please do it far away from me. I don't want to see it. I shook him off and stood against the elevator wall. James's head shot up. His eyes trembled with emotion. Then, bizarrely, they grew moist. You haven't yelled at me in so long, he said. Could you yell at me a few more times? Did I just get this bastard off by yelling at him? Pervert. The elevator doors opened. I rushed out and ran back to my room. The next morning, my dad and I dragged our luggage and flew to Italy. The temperature in Rome, in the south, was pleasant. We went to the Vatican museums, the Pantheon, and the Colosseum. When we got to the Trevi Fountain, I started to get that feeling of being watched again. As I looked around, my dad asked, "What? Did you spot James?" I was dumbfounded. "Dad, you knew?" My dad scoffed. He lifted his chin. "I spotted him back in Nara." "No way. Nara?" "Yeah, the guy who got knocked over by the buck. That was him." I slowly put two and two together. "You mean James has been following us since our trip began?" My dad sat by the fountain, relaxed. "Pretty much. Though he did fly back to the country twice, then immediately chased after us again. He's crazy. James must have lost his mind." I sighed. "Dad, do you have any coins?" "What for? Isn't this the legendary wishing well?" "I'm going to wish for James to act normal and stay far away from me." My dad smiled. "That's going to be difficult." "Why?" "Because they stopped allowing people to toss coins in here a long time ago. Halfway through our world tour, the company hit a funding crisis. My dad and I flew back overnight, holding emergency meetings with several investment firms. In the end, not a single deal came through. Without funding, our cash flow was about to break. The next step would be to cut subsidiary expenses and conduct massive layoffs. Hundreds of people's livelihoods were on the line. My dad was so worried he didn't sleep for days. Just when we were at our wits' end, a brand new investment company found us, offering to fill our funding gap. I don't believe in free lunches. I went to the investment company's office without telling anyone. Sure enough, I saw James. The office was probably a new rental. It was tiny, just big enough for a desk and a large office chair. "James." I pushed the door open, slamming my hands on the desk. "Where did you get that much money?" He stood up and answered honestly, "I sold my companies overseas." I stared at him in disbelief. "Are you insane? You sold your entire net worth to gamble on me." James looked down, his voice calm. "I'm not insane." After a few seconds of silence, he added, "I only go insane when you're not okay." I was completely baffled by him. "James, aren't you supposed to be the most rational, most objective person who always weighs the pros and cons for yourself? Why are you acting like a rebellious, childish teenager now?" "Yes, childish." I never thought the words James used to say to me would now be coming out of my mouth, directed at him. I should have refused. But if the price of refusal was hundreds of people losing their jobs, would that be too impulsive? In the end, we reached a funding agreement. The condition was, any and all meetings and discussions between Party A and Party B would be handled exclusively by my father. My dad readily accepted, and proposed that from now on, I would be the one washing the dishes after dinner. It took another 6 months for the company to weather the crisis. It was the end of the year. The company held a grand year-end gala in the ballroom on the top floor of the office building. I was supposed to be holding a glass of juice, but somehow it had turned into champagne. I hadn't touched alcohol in a year and a half. A little bit now should be fine, right? I raised my hand, but before the glass touched my lips, someone grabbed my wrist. "You're not well enough. You can't drink." James's face was stern and serious. I scowled. "Since when do investors care about this? Get lost." I tried to drink again, but James snatched the glass right out of my hand and downed it himself. I looked around, not wanting to make a scene and ruin the wonderful atmosphere. So I just went and got another glass from the champagne tower. But before I could bring it to my lips, James snatched it again and drank it all. I glared at him and got another. James watched me and drank again. Back and forth like this, he chugged down more than a dozen glasses. This was so boring, so childish. I couldn't take it anymore and hissed, "James, if you're sick, go see a doctor." Stop meddling in my business. One dad is enough for me. James's cheeks were flushed, and his eyes had a different look in them now, a mix of seriousness and pleading as he stared at me. I turned away, but he suddenly grabbed my arm and pulled me away. I struggled the whole way, but he still dragged me out onto the terrace. No one else was around. I finally let loose. James, why are you haunting me? If you hate me, why did you stay with me? Why are you helping me? Why are you controlling me? What kind of act are you still putting on? He didn't answer. I lifted his arm and bit down hard. I bit until my jaw ached before I let go. The stars were sparse, and fireworks occasionally burst in the night sky. James still hadn't let go of my hand. He just watched me with a slight frown, his eyes reflecting the light of the fireworks. When things quieted down, I heard James say in a low voice, "I don't hate you." "What did you say?" He repeated quietly, "I don't hate you. I'm not acting like a big dog that's been wronged." Ugh, gross. So I said loudly, "Only a fool would believe you." I turned to leave, but James hugged me from behind. "I have proof," he said urgently. He let me go, his hands trembling as he pulled a silver chain from around his neck. On it was a simple, plain ring. James took it off the chain and held it up in front of me. "I made this ring myself at a craft shop the day before our second anniversary," he said. "I wanted to make it by hand and put it on your finger on our anniversary. I was afraid you'd go buy one first, so I made up that excuse about not liking the rings here." James's voice got quieter and quieter, as if he were in pain. "I never thought you'd actually run off to South Africa to buy them. I regretted it for a long time, but I was afraid you'd get angry and throw a fit, so I never showed it to you." "Ha!" I laughed coldly. "If you're going to make up a story, Mr. Liang, at least put some effort into it. You can find rings like this anywhere." James shook his head and handed it to me, saying anxiously, "No, look, the inside of the ring has our initials and the date. I carved them myself." I took it. The next second, I flung the ring into the giant fountain below. "So what if you didn't hate me for those 3 years?" "James," I said, looking at his pale face and red-rimmed eyes. I enunciated every word. "Now I'm the one who hates you." 3 in the morning, I sat up in bed, furious. James is such a bastard, a menace. I hate him so much. He's filled my head with all this nonsense. I've been tossing and turning for 3 hours and still can't sleep. I couldn't help but wonder, were there really words on the ring? Did he really make it himself that year? A workaholic like James, who splits every minute into 8. Would he really do something so boring and time-consuming? He must have just made it recently. He just carved the old date on it to make me feel sorry for him. Yes, that has to be it. But I could check the craft shop's business records, or check the payment records on his phone to find out. When did James really make it? And so what if he did? Why am I still thinking about this? Stupid brain, go to sleep. 4 in the morning. Cursing myself for being so pathetic, I found myself by the fountain at the base of the office building. It wasn't light out yet. The fountain was off and it was pitch black all around. Suddenly, I heard a splashing sound from the pool. I jumped, the hair on my arms standing up. "Who's there? Larry? James? Damn it!" I turned to run, but his choked voice stopped me. "Larry, don't go. Please, help me look. The fountain turns on in half an hour, and once the circulation system starts, the ring will be lost forever." I gritted my teeth and took 2 more steps, but finally stopped. "Damn it, Larry, you're so damn pathetic." I walked over, pulled out the hand net I had hidden behind my back, and snapped, "Have you searched this area yet?" James stared, stunned for a moment, before I barked at him, "What are you looking at? Answer me." He mumbled, "Not yet." We split the area, bending over to search the bottom of the pool. As we were searching, our heads bumped together. I straightened up and yelled, "James, are you doing that on purpose? If you're not going to search properly, then get lost." James acted like he didn't hear me. He suddenly ducked his head under the water, then shot back up. "Found it." Just as he said it, a huge jet of water from the fountain rained down, soaking him completely. Yet he just stood there like a big idiot, holding the ring up for me to see. I couldn't help but laugh. I took the ring and sat down on the stone bench by the fountain. James slowly walked over and sat down gently beside me. I glared at him and scooted over. The sky began to brighten. It was a soft pink. I held the ring up to my eye, squinting at it. Did you really make this yourself? MHM. Did you really carve words on it? MHM. Did you really carve it on our anniversary? MHM. Do you really hate me? I don't. Why isn't this guy falling for it? You're lying. James looked at me eagerly, like he wanted to say something but was holding back. I glanced at him and said coldly, if you have something to say, spit it out. I don't dare say it. I'm afraid you'll feel sick if you hear it and, throw up again. James coughed, clearing his throat. But I'm going to say it anyway. Why are you still hanging around me? Just seeing you makes me feel sick. James lowered his head. I'm sorry. I waved my hand dismissively. Whatever, just say it. If I feel like throwing up, I'll hold it in. James glanced at me cautiously. He said, that night 3 years ago, the reason I approached you like that was because I thought you were beautiful and you felt familiar. I was already falling for you then. Later, I reminded myself every day not to fall in love with you, but it didn't seem to work. When I couldn't find any evidence, I felt both relieved and conflicted, because I didn't want to break up with you. It wasn't until you rushed me back home, and then the car crash happened, that I thought. James's words stopped abruptly. He was sneakily checking my reaction. I turned my head to look at him. Why'd you stop? James asked, are you feeling sick? I paused. No. James's eyes lit up. He said shamelessly, then can I confess one more time? No. The sun was rising, casting a golden glow on us. James stared at me, mesmerized. He said, then can I kiss you? Get lost. This idiot, this lunatic. He seems like a different person. Well then, I guess I can be convinced to get to know him all over again.